rising, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. I am Tayla Andre. Waking up with Tayla Andre has absolutely nothing to do with the time of day that we link up, but about waking up your third eye with unorthodox conversations leading to universal consciousness. So today we are going to go live with Dr. Atyia Martin, who was formerly there she is. Waiting. Hey! There's my boo! How you doing? I can't hear you. This is her first live. We're going to let her get it together. Hey, love. Can you hear me? Okay, say something. Oh, I can't hear you at all. I can hear.
All right.
There we are.
There we are. How's that?
Super fantastic. Fantastic. Oh, I
Love
can
it.
hear an echo though.
Oh, that's not good. Hold on. What about now?
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I can still hear me. I don't mind hearing you.
How's that? A little better?
Yeah. Perfect. So, Dr. Atyia Martin, formerly known as the Chief Resilient Officer for the City of Boston, is in my life. I'm super I'm super excited to have you. And with COVID-19, we have seen everybody panicking, everyone going absolutely crazy, and with you being one of the head honchos during the Boston bombing, and just knowing emergency management and knowing how to remain calm while the rest of the world is in like taken aback and have no idea how to process, let alone act. It seems as if it comes so natural to you. How do you manage, first off, to be so calm and cool and collected during times that people can't even remember their names?
I'd say the honest answer is I've had a lot of practice from a kid all the way up into adulthood, and having to deal with chaos and drama and having to still figure a way to move things forward. And I think that experience growing up, most people may not know that I grew up in Boston. And so, I grew up poor, grew up kind of in some ways in all the stereotypes, and developed a lot of skills. I had to be kind of a little adult. And then as an adult, I ended up being in fields that were just hectic and fast-paced and stressful. And I think for me, one of the most important lessons was learning how to be my own best friend, learning how to coach myself, learning how to know exactly how I'm feeling in moments so I can manage it better, so I can then help other people. If I don't have my stuff together, I can't help anybody else. And so working in emergency management, working in kind of public health world, working in even in the military, the police department, like all of those were very chaotic environments. And so I had to build those skills. And a lot of it is learning how to be present in the moment and learning how to slow down, ground myself through breathing, and then leverage my critical thinking skills to organize what's happening in the moment, and to figure out where are the facts, and where are the things that we're assuming because we are feeling certain ways, right? We got certain emotions going on because of the situation, the stress of the situation. So I spend a lot of time honing those skills And in emergency management situations where we're activated, meaning I've been in many roles where we have an operations center. And so we have, meaning that we have people from lots of different agencies and organizations in the same room, trying to coordinate information, trying to coordinate resources, trying to make sure that we are implementing whatever we plan for in a way that's equitable, kind of all of these different pieces. And I think through practice, I've gotten really good at it. But I wouldn't say that it's a natural way to be. It's definitely not, because our first instinct is for when the stress comes, when the pressure comes, to actually for our basically our brain to like drop into our feet, right? And so we don't know what the hell to do. And so that's been a lot of my experience in seeing what happens by default. And so it takes a lot of practice.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So right now we're being completely, one of the things you mentioned was, where are the facts? And I'm wondering if we even know where to obtain these facts, where there's, we're completely inundated with fake news every day, aside from the crisis that we're currently dealing with as a world. Where do we seek, or where do you seek facts? And not just news, but facts on the virus itself, how to protect ourselves and our family from the virus, and just, from a public health and from emergency management, how are we supposed to be conducting ourselves as parents, as children of our elders who are most susceptible to the disease? Like, how are we protecting ourselves and those around us?
So I heard two questions there. I heard the first question is, where do you get good information from, right? And then the second one being, how do we protect ourselves? Is that right?
Correct.
So getting good information is also a skill. It takes practice. But the most important thing in terms of how I navigate in that are best practices, which are, number one, look at where the source is coming from. Are these folks actually experts in the thing we're talking about? And so from a public health perspective, when we think about something like COVID-19 or this coronavirus, it's really about who are the experts in public health. And so looking to those experts to get good information. And so for us, that's the CDC, that's the Department of Public Health at the state level, that's the local public health department, but it's also members in our community who have a level of expertise in these issues, not random people who read some articles or watched a video and think that they can now magically explain everything to everyone. It takes more than that to actually give good quality information. I actually had a situation recently where someone very close to me sent me a video of people. It was of some random doctor in China, who, it was this low budget video that was put together, and it basically was saying all you need to do is take a lot of vitamin C. It's just a virus. And they thought this was legitimate. And so I'm asking them questions, because I don't want to just tell them, this is BS, right? I'm trying to help them be able to ask the questions that they need to be asking anytime they see something like that. So I'm asking them things like, well, did you look up this doctor to see if this is even a real person? Did you look up to see what the actual experts on these issues that we know are experts are saying about this allegation? Is anyone else aside from this one person saying that this is a thing that's true, right? So the more sources we have, the more likely that information is more credible. And what I want to be clear about is the more reliable sources we have, not just that we're seeing it in a lot of places, but the more reliable sources there are, the more kind of validation that we have. It's almost like in the Bible when they say precept upon precept, line upon line, right? It's that same concept. You want to make sure that you're seeing quality, consistent information from lots of different sources. And so, how can we protect ourselves? So, number one, the most important thing is to stay away from other people who you aren't normally up under on a regular basis, right? And so, which means your household, right? So, stay away from people. I've heard of people having parties, to, getting, and then so this, I think this, if I remember correctly, this was Connecticut. A bunch of young people had a party to be, rebellious against this thing, which really is code for I'm lonely and I'm bored. Um, and they had this party, and 14 people that went to the party ended up getting the virus, right? So these are the kind of things that we should not be doing. We've had, in the early days of this virus, I'm not going to remember his name, but there was a basketball player who was part of a group who they were concerned about because they had been traveling. And so they wanted them to be careful until their test came back. He was touching all the microphones. He was touching all of the reporters, recording equipment, thinking it was funny and that this wasn't really serious. And it turns out he actually had the virus when his test came back. And another one of his teammates got the virus because of how reckless he was. And so please don't be that person. We have a lot of people who don't think this is real. Tell that to the over 10,000 people who've lost their lives to this across the world. Tell that to, what are we at in the United States? I think we're at, 1,000 people who have died from the virus here in the United States. So, this is real. But also there's a lot we can be doing, right? And so this is not to create this ridiculous sense of extreme fear either, right? So that we need the balance. We need healthy fear so that we know I need to be paying attention or something I need to be doing different. And then we need to do those things. So in addition to staying away from people who aren't in your household, making sure that we're washing our hands on a regular basis. If we do have to go out, try to wear gloves so that you're not, it's a good reminder not to touch your face, but it also protects your hands from surfaces. It's a great idea to try to stay away from people when you are outside, even if you have to go to the grocery store or whatever. I actually saw driving yesterday, actually, saw the ATM machine area before you get into the bank. There were like 9 people in there waiting in line together. I was just all squeezed in there waiting for the ATM machine. Please don't do that either. And so there are these very basic things we can be doing. Wash your hands on a regular basis. We should just be doing that anyways. That's just good practice. Just to be a responsible person in general. You should wash your hands definitely every time you go to the bathroom. Please don't be that person either. And then I think the other important piece is to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, right? That you're getting good sleep, that you're eating healthy meals. Eat lots of fruits and vegetables. You can never go wrong with fruits and vegetables. Drink lots of water. Make sure you're managing your stress. What are the things that help you feel good as you navigate the day? What are your outlets? Is it art? Is it music? I mean, you don't have to be a musician, but maybe you just like to like Miss Tayla, you just like to pretend you're a performer, right? And you're in your car just singing it out, or in your home just singing it out. But whatever the things are that help you feel good, stay safe, and feel good in a responsible way, that those are the things that are also important, because ultimately the healthier we are, even if we get the coronavirus, the less of an impact it will have on us. So those are the main things that we can be doing. The last piece I'll talk about is not necessarily in terms of protecting ourselves, but just checking on the people we love. Call the folks that you care about. Make sure they're okay. Make sure they have what they need, right? If you have no older adults, check on them, even if they're not a relative. Check on them and just see if they need anything, because they shouldn't be out here that we have to take care of each other, regardless of what the government's doing, regardless of what anybody else is doing or not doing.
Mm-hmm.
We are responsible for each other, and we should be making sure that we are owning that responsibility.
I feel like you covered so much in such a short period as far as being responsible and being mindful and checking in on our elders. You know how I feel with my elders. What, as far as, as far as work is concerned and in the workplace, so I'd like to pivot from just like being healthy and emergency management and like how, as far as employees are concerned, how are we managing like ourselves in our workplace, or our home is our workplace, but how are we managing or should be managing ourselves at home regarding work during this, staying at home?
Mm-hmm. So first, actually, I want to take a very slight and relevant detour, which is we are fortunate enough to be able to work from home. There are a lot of us who don't have that luxury and who have lost our jobs, or who are just, maybe they still have their jobs, they're just not getting paid because they work the kind of jobs where if you are not there, you don't get paid.
Yes.
And so I want to acknowledge those of us who are in that situation. And I also want to acknowledge that situation disproportionately impacts Black people. All that said, in terms of what we can be doing kind of when your home becomes the office. So I think number one, getting dressed is important. You don't have to get dressed fancy, but getting out of your pajamas and putting on clothes is a mental cue for us to transition, right? So you're transitioning from kind of your personal life to your work life. And then when you're finished with work, and so that, which means you have to have a schedule for what that looks like for you. So for some people, they like to do like a long stretch, and then at the end of that long stretch, they're done. Some people need multiple chunks, like I need 2 hours and then break, then I need 2 hours and break, then I need 2 hours and break. To be clear about what that looks like for you, and what it is you're trying to accomplish in those moments when you are working, so that you know when you've accomplished your goal, so that when that end point comes, whatever it looks like for you, that you can transition from the clothes you have on, whether they're sweatpants and a t-shirt, who cares what it is, into the clothes that you would normally be home in. And so through that transition, you then now tell your brain and yourself, I am no longer working right now, and now I'm back into kind of my real life. The challenge becomes for those of us who have kids. It gets complicated when you have kids, right? Don't roll your eyes. You know the
Drop these motherfuckers off somewhere.
Yeah, so it becomes way more complicated. And I wish there was a secret equation that I could give you all to say, if you do A, B, then C will happen and it will magically be okay. But unfortunately, children are not predictable or equations. They're actually real human beings, and there is no way to do that. However, you know your children, and depending on what age they are, depends on what strategies you need. So when you have older kids, they understand, and usually from about elementary school, even some pre-K, right, and even some 4-year-olds, like they understand when you say, listen, here's what we're going to do. From this time to this time, you're going to do coloring, or you're going to play in your game, or you're going to go do your schoolwork, or you're going to do whatever, and I'm going to do this. And then at this time, we're going to check in with each other, right? So that you're managing your expectations and you're managing their expectations. When they're younger, it's way trickier. And it means you're not going to get those big chunks of time. It means that you have to literally work around their schedule. And and all kids are different. Some kids, they could just hang out with themselves and play with stuff and they're good. Some kids, they want to be up under us all the time and they want to know what you're doing. They're climbing on you, all the stuff. They're yelling. You're trying to be on a call. They're in the background calling your name, like all those things, right? Like that's real. And you know what? You just ride the wave, right? Because and you shouldn't feel bad about that. If people can't understand the situation we're in, and have patience with the fact that you have a family and you have young children, um, they shouldn't be upset with you. Now, granted, we should be muting our phones when we're on those calls whenever possible and all of those things. But at the end of the day, life is real for all of us. And hopefully people will be respectful of the fact that, hey, I'm here, but I got real life going on at the same time. And then I think the other piece is to be patient with yourself and the kids. It gets real easy to ramp up, right? Because you're trying to do something, and the way that we'll frame it in our brain is you're stopping me from doing the thing I'm trying to do right now, right? When in reality, they're just being them, right? It ain't even about you. It's just them being them. And so to kind of remind ourselves of those things, and try in managing ourselves and our own expectations around what we should expect from kids at a certain age range, particularly if you know that that's how they usually are. And then the last thing I'll say about that is I think I'm making some of this sound easier than it is, right? And so I want to acknowledge that this stuff is hard. It is hard to do. It is hard to manage being a parent during normal times. Now we've added this complication into the mix where we're trying to juggle family and work at the same time. And so in
We're gonna let that
well,
buff
one of
for a minute
the
while she
things that
comes
helps us
back.
through that. Oh, what were you gonna say?
Nope, I'm here.
And the last thing I'll say is the most important thing is that we have a network of people that we can lean on to help us ground ourselves back into who we really are, even when sometimes we didn't show up in a situation as our best selves. It's important to have that network to so that you're checking on each other. And I'm not talking about like Facebook friend level of like thousands of people or hundreds of people. I'm talking about like your network of close folks that that and that you have healthy relationships with. And if you don't have that network, it's a good time to start building that network because we need each other. And none of us have done most of the things that we've accomplished in our life by ourselves, even if complete and total strangers help us. None of us have done this by ourselves. And it's hard to navigate by yourself. We're actually not built that way as human beings. So that rugged individualism has no real place in real life. So I'll stop there.
So, Dr. Atyia Martin is the CEO and founder of All Aces Inc., which is a diversity inclusion, and we don't like the word inclusion, but a diversity and equity firm that is completely outside of the box, doing the work in an unorthodox manner.
Shouting out my people.
And let's talk about like racism at this point. Like there have been multiple cases of Asians being beat up for simply not even coughing, not sneezing, but just walking down the street being themselves. And so how do we combat the xenophobia that, we may individually have at the grocery store and see someone of Asian descent and kind of like go down another aisle? Like, how do we manage ourselves during this time and just rehumanizing ourselves?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. So I think the first place to start is actually almost full circle, which is we talked about, how do you stay calm? How do you manage yourself under pressure? And so, this is a situation under pressure where we're under pressure. And so there's a lot of fear. And the dangerous thing about fear is it tends to tap into the opposite of our best selves, right? We are not thinking critically. It's easier for us to start to do the us against them mentality, especially when we're scared. And so to own that and acknowledge that even as a person of color, we can be upholding the system of racism, in terms of how we navigate, how we engage with each other, whether it's within group, across group, that there's ways that we hold up the system and that are unhealthy and that are actually um, not just holding up the system of racism, but also just reinforcing systems of oppression in general, kind of the theme that we see across all forms of oppression. So, concrete example, uh, when we as people of color see another person of color, right? Whether there's some Asians who don't think they're people of color. Cool. Reality is the rest of the world sees all of us lumped together as people of color. Um, when we see someone who's Asian and as a black woman, right? I might have some of those thoughts in the back of my mind because there's so much information coming at me that's saying, be careful of them, they're the problem, be scared of them, right? I have to be conscious that that's a real thing. And no matter, even if I completely and totally disagree with it, that's something that I have to manage in myself. So that's the first piece, is to acknowledge that this is real and that all of us do things that are that can be holding up that system. The other piece is to uh, decide for yourself what you think. Decide for yourself who you want to be out in the world. Don't let fear, don't let conformity, meaning what everybody else expects from you, to be the thing that drives how you engage with other people, or how you navigate, how you think about yourself and other people. Like, don't let other people decide that for you. And that's the thing that's dangerous about racism and other forms of oppression, is they're really all about conformity. And they plant these ideas in our brains about who people are supposed to be, how we're supposed to be, and therefore, here's that remember I said there's no real equation for managing kids, right? They try to sell you that there's an equation for how people are supposed to be. Well, you're black, so you're this. Well, you're Latino, so you're this. Or you're Latinx, so you're this. You're Asian, so you're this. And in this case of COVID-19, you're Asian, so I should be afraid of you because you're part of the source of a disease, when that's actually not the truth. People don't realize that China is uh, the second most popular tourist destination in the world. It doesn't, I didn't say that it's the second most popular place where Chinese people are. It's the second most popular tourist destination, which means other people who are not Chinese who go to China to partake in the beauty, to experience it, and all these other things. And so those people then leave and go to wherever they came from, right? And so wherever you are across the world, there are people who have been exposed, right, who are not Chinese. And so it makes no sense to add on to the stress of the situation by being scared of people for no reason. The other piece is, it's not China's fault that this virus exists. Viruses show up in different places around the world when they feel like it, and not because we did something extra special as people to make it happen. Now, the caveat to that is climate change is a factor, right? Climate change, we do have an impact on the climate, and there's some kind of early research that shows that this might be related to climate change and the warming of the earth and all those other things. So that is a factor, and that's related to people, but not in terms of specific groups of people. And so I want to make sure that we're using facts to make decisions. Want to make sure that we are rehumanizing other people, rehumanizing ourselves, so that we can actually get through this. When we start alienating each other, uh, we will not do well in this situation. We need each other. There is no way about it. We are interdependent. We are we are connected to each other even if we don't want to be. Even in social isolation, we are still impacting one another. So let's decide for ourselves who we want to be, and let's decide for ourselves how we're going to interact with people based on the merits of the person, based on how we decide we want to navigate the world, and not based on someone making us scared and driving us to do things that actually don't make sense in the bigger scheme of things.
Mm-hmm. Last question, unless there's anything else that you want to say that we have not covered. As far as, so I'm asking you this question not because you are a super professional in this field, but because I honor you and I respect you and I know your due diligence is through the roof. And so based on what we're seeing as far as this bill is concerned and, you know, citizens receiving a $1,200 check when rent ain't been $1,200 in a decade. um, how would you suggest people manage, like, financially? And I know finance isn't what you do, but based on this bill and based on the lack of finances and a lot of people not being able to work from home and having to tap into the system, they said that over 3 million people are applied for unemployment. I believe the last article I read said 1.8 more million cases of SNAP or food stamps has been applied for. Like, how are we supposed to manage? It doesn't make any sense that these billionaires are getting, you know, these bailouts, but the tax-paying citizens are getting like an advance on our taxes.
Mm-hmm. I have a lot of ways I feel about that. So yes, you're right. $1,200 is a drop in the bucket when it comes to what real people are dealing with. It's helpful, but it's not nearly enough to cover anyone's real expenses. I think in terms of what we should be doing, this is going to sound harsh, but I'm going to say it anyways. The things that we should be doing are things we should have already been doing, and it's kind of late now to try to make it happen. And what I mean by that is and in the we, I mean the royal we, not just Black people or people of color or white people, but all of us. So number one, we have created a society where there's basically kind of this economic segregation, right? Especially for people of color and especially for Black people. And then when you look at all the different kinds of Black people, especially for African Americans. And then there's also this, is part of that, there's this labor segregation where if you look at the numbers, you know, we predominantly work in certain kind of fields, right? Because those have been the fields that we've been allowed, quote unquote, allowed to work in, where we're more accepted. And those are the same fields that get paid less. Those are the same fields that are more likely to be impacted by things like this. And so we decided as a society that only certain people should have certain kind of jobs. And because of that, you know, we're in this situation. I just saw something recently. I'm not going to remember where now, begins with an M. Michigan? Nope. Minneapolis, maybe. Where they were saying that Black men are, middle-aged Black men are almost half the cases of COVID-19 in that area, right? And so if you swim upstream and you say, okay, well, why would that be? There's a great article that I think is on Black Enterprise, where they're talking about how Black and brown people are sacrificing their health and increasing the likelihood that they're going to get COVID-19 to get a paycheck, right? And so these are the folks who are, you know, delivering stuff for us and, you know, doing all of this work. And we in society decided that that was, you know, how things should be. And I think we have work to do collectively to make some different decisions. So how do we as people of color lean into our power and figure out what it is that we need? Where are there the biggest opportunities for career growth, for entrepreneurial growth? And how do we create the pathways to do those things so that we can build the kind of financial security that will allow us to weather situations like this? Because right now, most of us can't. So that's kind of the big, broad stroke piece. For and I think that there's a lot we can do, at least to identify those things, those pathways as people of color, especially Black people. Like, we have the opportunity the data's there. Where are the industries where there's going to be the most career growth, where there's the best wages, and not just hourly, but salary with benefits? Where are the biggest opportunities for us to start businesses? And how do we, once we identify those things, then we actually have to figure out what is the plan to actually start to penetrate those areas, right? And not wait for somebody else to do it for us. Because if we wait for somebody else to do it for us, we'll go another 400 years and we'll still be in the same situation. So no one else can give you freedom. No one else can give you anything. Anything that we have of value is earned. We fought for it. Everything works that way. And this is the same thing. Our economic freedom, our economic liberation is really dependent on our ability to collect, when I say collectively, I don't mean like all Black people or all people of color, because that's not realistic. But for those of us who kind of are paying attention and are and have access to that kind of data and have access to the wherewithal to help kind of start paving the way in these fields, both on the job side and on the career side, and on the entrepreneurial side, that we do those things. No one's coming to save us, as you can see. No one is coming to save us except for us. So I think it's very important that we are clear about that. And I also think it's important that we partner with other people who of different races who have the same values, right? Because we also can partner with other folks in healthy relationships to tap into their strengths and have a reciprocal relationship. So what I mean explicitly by that is, there are white people who actually are very knowledgeable about the real, full, complicated history of this country, the present day things that are happening that are, there are lots of people like that. And so how do we partner with them? But we need our own plan, right? Like, we need to be clear about what we need. We need to be clear about what we want to partner on, and we have to stay in the driver's seat of our own situation, even when we're partnering with other people, which we also have a tendency to do, to get lost in other people's struggles, lost in other people's battles and fights, and to the detriment of our own goals. And so I'll stop there.
Dr. Atyia Martin, my blue, I love you.
I love you too, beautiful.
Lastly, I would love to give people a full introduction into All Aces Inc. What is All Aces? What are you doing, quote unquote, since you left the city? I ain't seen you. Where you been at and what you been doing?
I've been all over the world. It's been amazing because I have an amazing team. We basically work with organizations on what we call a diversity, inclusion, and equity transformation, or DIET, because we all need a good acronym if we're going to do this. So for us, that means starting with racism and making sure that we help organizations better understand what racism is as a system of oppression, how oppression shows up in organizations in ways that disproportionately impact people of color, and how understanding those impacts and swimming upstream to the root causes actually is helps them develop a better organization, right? And so what we've learned in our work is that most organizations or where people of color are saying, I'm having these experiences, it's not just the experience, it's not the interpersonal interaction. The question organizations need to be asking themselves, instead of where's the bad apple and how do we get rid of it, is what are we doing as an organization that is creating an environment where people are doing these things, right? Is it a policy issue? Is it a programmatic issue? Is it a cultural issue? What are the things that we're doing that help to facilitate this experience of people of color? And here's the extra special part, which is when we address those issues, it actually helps the whole organization because it's a signal that something's broken. And so being able to address those issues actually helps the organization to be a thriving organization, to be more successful in lots of different ways and on lots of different measures that we can talk about another time. And then the other part is how we actually advance racial equity and how we actually support social justice, which is what are the things we need to do to address those issues? How do we have a practical approach to changing ourselves as an organization? And how do we make sure that we are in it for the long term? A lot of organizations and traditional DEI approaches they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? We heard some other companies doing this, we should all be doing it. So we all just do stuff. We have events and we have ERG groups or employee resource groups or affinity groups. You know, you have folks learn about racism in that one workshop or those two workshops that we did. Remember that time, like 5 years ago, we did the workshop, you know, those kind of things, and then wonder why it's not working, right? And the other piece is, so we're always looking for super simple answers to something that is very complicated, and that it isn't just a policy issue, isn't just a strategy issue, it's also a human issue. And so how do we bridge the gap between professional and personal, or what we call proper development, and organizational development? That we have to be learning and growing as individuals and collectively as an organization in order to really have the kind of long-standing transformative change necessary to really have the kind of organizations that anybody would want to work for, right? If people of color don't want to work there, then you had better believe that a lot of the people who are there now probably don't want to work there either.
Message. I know you are super busy. I want to thank you for your time. I love you. I appreciate you. Dr. Atyia Martin, All Aces Inc. How can we reach you? How can we find you?
So allacesinc.com. We actually have an online learning community called intentionallyact.com. Intentionallyact.com. You can also get there through don'treact.com or advanceracialequity.com. And it's really an opportunity for those of us who really care about these issues and are trying to figure out for ourselves as individuals and for our organizations how we can have a deeper understanding, a more nuanced understanding, and have some practical tools and learn from each other, most importantly, and build the kind of community that will help us to do this work better, but also stay in the work, because this is lonely work. It's hard, whether you're doing this work as an individual and just trying to be a better person, or you're doing this work for an organization. It's lonely and it's hard. And so intentionallyact.com really is our attempt, our contribution to being able to kind of expand our horizon, our understanding of these issues, as well as the possibilities of action that usually are hard to arrive at by ourselves.
Thank you so much. I love you.
Love you too, my dear.
Have an amazing day.
You too.
Bye.